Sermon on the Mount. We're in chapter 6 of Matthew, verses 25 through 34. Feel free to follow along there. I feel like this week, because we are kind of skipping around within this sermon a little bit, I need to give you a little bit of context before we get to the part we're going to focus on here. Jesus has just said those memorable verses that I'm sure you've heard before, where he says, lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither rust nor moth destroy. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. He's talking about where our focus is, where our loyalty is, where our hearts are, right? And he goes on to say, do this because no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and you'll despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Or as Clint Eastwood would say, you can't serve God and mammon. Yes, so that's the setup, is Jesus has just included that part in his sermon. He's asking us to focus and realize that you can't serve two masters. And as he asks us to invest our loyalty in the right place, in kingdom things, in kingdom riches, in kingdom concerns, and that's your heart will follow if you invest in those kinds of places. And your master, God, will take care of the rest. Then we get to Matthew 6:25. And he says, therefore, so pause right here. Because there are two masters who you could give your loyalty, but you can only serve one of them, because that's the reality of the situation you live in. Jesus says, because of that, therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life. This phrase, do not worry about your life, is stated in such a way in the original language as to communicate, stop what you're in the process of doing right now. Jesus knows us so well, and he knows his audience well, to say, this isn't, someday you'll want to apply this. I know you people, you're worrying about stuff right now. Stop, he's saying. Stop worrying about it, because where your heart is, that's where your treasures are, that's where your heart will be also. So stop worrying. Well, what is worry? Dictionary defines worry this way. It's used as a verb. It's to give way to anxiety or unease, to allow one's mind to dwell on difficulties or troubles. As a noun, a state of anxiety and uncertainty over actual or potential problems. I kind of put it in my words, worry is a fearful focus on actual or potential problems or concerns. It's that fearful focus, and it's definitely something that carries with it anxiety. The definition, the dictionary used anxiety several times. I use the word fearful. Well, in Matthew 6:25, he says, I tell you, do not worry about your life. What you will eat or what you will drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Isn't not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? Now, these are things that his audience would have been worried about and was in the process of worrying about, right? We don't necessarily worry about those things. Not too many of us, too often, do we worry about, what am I going to eat? What will I wear? Winter is coming. Will I have it? Usually our closets are full. What are the kind of things that we worry about? Well, we worry about, tell me if I'm wrong, will I be able to retire? Anybody ever have worried about that? This young man here probably hasn't started to worry about that. One day, I tell my kids, prepare to retire, because even if you don't want to retire, there's a good chance someday you'll say, I wish I could retire. Will I be able to retire? We worry about that. Will my kids be able to go to college and get a good job? Will my money hold out? My 401k has become a 201k in the last 2 years. Will I get that job? Will he or she call me back? Maybe that's more of your line, hopefully you'll get that call back. Will I ever get married? Will our kids be healthy? Will I be healthy? Those are the kinds of things I think we worry about these days in 21st century America. Jesus would say to us, stop worrying about those things. Isn't life more than retirement? Isn't life more than college education? Isn't life more than what you're going to do for a living? And of course we would all say, yes, yeah, Lord, it is, but I would still like to, get married, have a job, be able to retire someday, experience good health, But notice what Jesus isn't saying. He's not saying, oh, retirement isn't important. Kids' college is not important. Jobs are not important. He's not saying that at all. As a matter of fact, as we'll see in a minute, he's kind of saying the opposite. Because he's saying, I know about those things, and we're going to take care of you. Now he tries sort of a different tact on the same line of reasoning. He just comes at us from another angle to try and get this point home to us. He uses what we might call an argument from lesser to greater. You may have done this in your life, maybe when you were young, you wanted to take your parents' car out, and you said, well, Dad, you trust me in the driveway. Won't you trust me to drive around the block? Oh, okay, we've used these arguments from lesser to greater. Here's what Jesus says. He says, look at the birds of the air. They do not reap or sow or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? These birds, they're lesser. You're so much, won't he take care of you? He doesn't say that, look, birds don't work for their food, so you don't need to work for your food. Just kind of hang around and kind of drop it into your lap. No, he's not saying that. He's just trying to make the point. God will take care of you. Look, he takes care of these insignificant little critters. He's certainly going to take care of you. So here's our first takeaway for the day. Stop worrying. Obviously, that's what Jesus is saying. Well, how? Birds. That's how. God will take care of them. He'll take care of you. Just remember, God cares about you much more than a bird. Knowing this should change the way we live. Knowledge can change our behavior. My other job is I do a lot of medical transport driving, so I put a lot of miles on. And I drove through a town that as you're driving through town, also the speed limit drops from 55 down to 45 for about a quarter of a mile, and then it goes right back up to 55. And there's nothing there. I don't know why, it seems like a dumb place to put 45. So I would drive through at 55 plus miles an hour, and I got pulled over. And luckily I got a warning from this very nice officer. Yes, sir. You're right, sir. Here's my driver's license, sir. That's how you talk to a policeman. And she actually, so this man, was very nice and gave me a warning. But I drive through there a lot, and I'll tell you now that I know there's a policeman there, knowledge changes the way I live, right? And I drive 45, like right on the button. I don't go over 45 for that quarter mile, no matter how silly I think it is. Knowledge changes the way I live, and this knowledge that God cares for us more than birds should change the way we live. God cares for the birds and takes care of them. He's going to take care of you. So what do you know? Well, you know that birds are not made in his image, right? Christ didn't die for the birds. He died for you. God loves me more than a bird. I'm his son or his daughter. that knowledge should change the way we live. Do you think you can trust God to meet your needs? If so, Jesus would say, acknowledge that through your actions. Stop worrying. God knows and cares about you more than the bird. Jesus goes on in verse 27, can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? This will be our second takeaway. Worry accomplishes nothing. Okay? Now, concern, care, planning, wise processing of possible outcomes, prayerfully trying to make good decisions, being a good steward, those things accomplish stuff, right? But worry, the fearful focus of potential problems, the what-ifs of life, no, that doesn't accomplish anything, and that's what Jesus is saying here. You can't add a single hour to your life by worrying. I love what these famous and somewhat famous people had to say about worry. Corrie ten Boom said, worry does not empty tomorrow of its sorrow, it empties today of its strength. Dan Zandra said, worry is the misuse of imagination, right? Because we have to imagine what could go wrong, and it's just a misuse of that. Swedish proverb says, worry often gives a small thing a big shadow. And then E. Joseph Kosman says, if you want to test your memory, try to recall what it is you were worrying about a year ago. Do you remember? You know, I probably have a general idea, but say 2 years ago or 5 years ago, I don't remember what I was worried about. It's true. No one adds to their life or gets a kid into college or overcomes an illness because they worry. Again, should this knowledge affect the way we live? Planning, processing, and knowledge put into action has helped many a situation. But worry, the fearful focus on potential problems, no, worry has not helped. And Jesus kind of keeps after this idea and doesn't let us get away. And he says, and why do you worry about clothes? See how the flowers of the field grow? They do not labor or spin. And yet I tell you, not even Solomon, in all his splendor, was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? Again, he uses that argument from lesser to greater to say, come on, the grass is taken better care of than Solomon. Surely you understand God cares more and sees your need and will provide for you if he'll take care of the grass and flowers. So he goes on, so do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. First of all, you're acting like a pagan. That's sort of the MO of somebody who doesn't know God, doesn't know this God who cares more for you than birds, who doesn't know this God who clothes the grass better than Solomon. You're acting like an unbeliever. But secondly, God knows that you need them. So here's our third takeaway. First of all, he'll take care of you. Remember, we learned that. That was our first takeaway. He'll take care of you. Birds, remember that. Secondly, worry accomplishes nothing. And thirdly, here he says, God knows about your needs. Sometimes that's all we need to hear, isn't it? God knows. He's aware of your needs. If you were here last week, we talked about the Lord's Prayer. You remember that part of his sermon where he said, don't use lots of words because the Lord already knows what you need, right? So he already knows what we need. That should be a comfort to us to say, will God, we get into a situation where we start to have that fearful focus on potential problems, God, do you even know this is happening? God knows. Are you fearful about the future? God knows. Are you fearful about the Middle East or the war in Europe? God knows about that. Are you fearful about, worried about your health, the economy, your kids' college fund, or your retirement? God knows. God knows about everything you're worried about. He knows about it. Now Jesus brings the whole thing back around, and we hear Jesus say, well, instead of worry, he's built his case, don't worry, but instead of that, he says, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. So let's go back to the start of that, verse 33. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. We're back talking about where's your focus, where's your loyalty, where's your commitment. He's saying, instead of worrying about these things that you can't affect by your worry anyway, instead, focus on kingdom things. The word righteousness here is used in an ethical sense rather than a legal sense, which means it's not about legally are you righteous, have you been made righteous by your asking Christ into your life, and you give him your sin and he gives you his righteousness, right? That's a legal transaction that happens when we accept Christ and we are made righteous. That's not what this is talking about. This is talking about in an ethical sense, how do we live life? The righteousness that we live out every day. It's our theology in action. So he's saying, seek first these things, these things of the kingdom, these things that are kingdom-esque. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, or your sanctification. And all these things, all the things you need, will be given to you as well. One commentary I looked at on this verse put it this way. It said, this referred to the physical and normal needs of life. God will not leave believers stranded. This is a general principle, which is a key phrase, which cannot always answer the specific questions of why this individual or that individual may suffer loss or is in need. So this is kind of like a proverb. The commentary said this is a general principle to live by. This is not a transaction with God. Hey God, I focused on kingdom things and I still have a need. I think Jesus would say, you're missing my point here. This is not, I'm trying to teach you how to live, not how to corner God. I did all the right things and you didn't come through. That's not what we're talking about here. We're saying, in a general sense, as you are the kind of person who focuses on kingdom things and your righteousness, you are becoming more like Christ. He will take care of you. Jesus is teaching where our hearts need to be focused. And they need to be focused on heavenly things. If they're focused on earthly things and wants, then we'll not store up treasures in heaven. We will not seek first his kingdom or his righteousness. We'll be distracted from the kingdom by the temporal, and we'll end up worshiping what it is we focus on. Right? And so that's the point he's trying to make is your focus, when you are consumed with anxiety and you have the fearful focus on potential problems rather than focusing on kingdom things and who God is and how much he loves you, that he knows about your circumstance and that he's going to provide for you, you become a different kind of person. You lose your way. I have permission to tell this story, so in case you were wondering. I have a sister named Michelle. I've maybe mentioned her to some of you as we've talked. Michelle used to be a world-class worrywart. I mean, she worried about everything. She even asked several times, I've heard her ask, when you would relay some story to her, should I worry about that? No, don't worry about it. We'll pray about it or whatever. But she was a world-class worrier. But over time, she got involved with a really good church, and that very quickly began to change. So quickly that today I would say she's not much of a worrier. I mean, I think she struggles with it, at a normal level. But really doesn't have a problem with worry. I would not describe her that way. So I asked her, well, what made the difference? And she said that this church that she had gotten involved with a few years back was having sort of a potluck dinner, and she wanted to go and meet some people. And so she's not a cook, so she went to the store and bought some salad, from the deli there, and brought it to church. And while church service was going on, she snuck into the church kitchen to find a sort of a real bowl, that she could scoop her store-bought salad into, so that it wouldn't look like she bought it at the store, but it would look more like, I made this, right? And so she's looking through the cabinets for a bowl like that, and a guy walks in and says, can I help you? What's up? And she said, I'm just looking for a bowl for this salad that I brought, because I just don't think it'll look right if I serve it in this, store-bought container. And he said to her, oh, okay, well, I'll leave you with your idol. And he left. And she thought, she's told me as we related this, she said it just hit me like a smack upside the head. Like, that's what I'm doing. I'm worried, so worried about what people will think of me, that I'm missing the church service. I'm being sort of deceptive in a way to try and bolster my reputation. And I'm more concerned about this than I am about worshiping or getting to know these people or whatever, and really, building friendships. I've made this an idol. This is more important to me. And she said that just seeing it in that light changed her. God used that comment to change her. And like I said, I would not describe her as a worrier today. So let me encourage you. What is it that you worry about? Not, what are you concerned about? Not what are you doing some research on to wisely make some decisions and plan for, but what causes you to fearfully focus on actual or potential problems? Is it your reputation? Is it your future, your health? I think we all have sort of little areas that we're most susceptible in, right? I've got a couple that are coming to my mind as I think about this. Whatever it is, hear Jesus' words to you. God knows about your need, about your concern. He cares. He doesn't look at you and think, he cares about what you care about. And remember Jesus' other words, that worry changes nothing. You can't add a day, you can't solve a problem by worrying about it. Instead, focus on kingdom things and how your needs might actually be used by God in your sanctification, in your becoming like Christ. I can tell you from experience, it's not usually in my successes and my abundance that God changes me to be more like Christ. It's usually in my places where I have to trust Him. He's got to come through. Give up your idol and know that Jesus is your master. Trust Him and pray. Let's do that right now. Lord, thank you for a morning where we can readjust our focus back onto you. Help us to continue to focus on you and your kingdom and your kingdom work in our world. Help us to focus on that all week long. Remind us every day that you know about our situation, you care about us and our needs, and you will provide. Lord, we ask all this in your name. Amen. Well, last week I mentioned that I made a painting to go along with each of these sermons. This was my painting for this sermon. It's the North American worry bird. And he's got bloodshot eyes from lack of sleep, losing feathers due to a nervous condition, builds nests that are too large so that he can impress other worry birds, hoards seed for fear there won't be any tomorrow. And then finally he holds on to everything too tightly because he has a fear of letting go. And I think that's especially true for the North American worry bird. Other parts of the world, I don't know if they worry so much about that. Oh, and his the call of the North American worry bird is like this. What if? What if? What if? So you'll know when you hear one. Well, I'll